if you can do yours. In way of introduction, so I'm really pleased to have Prigat joining us here. Ira has spent his entire career in the medical device business, 2 times as a very senior leader, 1 time as a CEO of dental laser surgical company, and later on worked with me in Itamar Medical. In both occasions, he placed Japan and in some cases also China as the center of his activity. So he's very familiar with those markets. And of course, Ira is also a graduate of the Tokyo University. He spent multiple years studying in Japan, knows the culture inside and out, and speaks fluent Japanese. And I tested it myself when I asked him to interview a candidate. And when he saw him after the interview on Zoom, he almost fainted because there was no accent associated with the Japanese. So it was very, very amazing. So with that, I asked, there is a great opportunity to learn about that market. It's a fascinating market. I will tell all of you there is a nugget that Ira will share on how to generate revenue early on that is not well known, but it's really useful and can help all of you quickly. So with no further ado, Mr. Prigato-san.
Hi, yoroshiku onegaishimasu. First of all, thank you very much, Gilad. It's really a pleasure to be part of NCI and just had a really short taste of this amazing group of people. And I think the work here is very beneficial for the Israeli medtech ecosystem. So I'd like to present you all Japan as a medtech opportunity market, which I believe is one of the best in the world. I'm a little bit biased, but Gilad already mentioned that. Just briefly about myself, and later on, I'm sure you will have the opportunity on your own time to take a look at LinkedIn. I'm the founder and CEO of Network in Motion. We are a business consulting firm specializes in the medtech market in Japan. We serve both Israelis and Japanese. For Israelis, of course, the startups and the mature. And for Japanese, we are doing scouting, deal flow management, and supporting the negotiations. You will understand why this is very important down the road. As Gilad mentioned, all my history is in my professional history is in the medical field, and the background of education you already saw. So a little bit about Japan in the sense of what is, Japan is fascinating, but let's talk numbers. So Japan is a superpower, is an economic superpower with 125 million people. It's the third largest economy in the world after USA and China. It's also the third, or some will say the second medical market in the world. And with the difficulties that we have with the European market, MDR, etc., and the Chinese market that is really changing a lot in the last 2-3 years with a lot of control of the government, Japan is really becoming, in my opinion, the second market opportunity after the United States. Japan is also the #1 oldest society in the world, and the numbers are fascinating because you can see that from 125 million people, almost 30% are above 65. This number is growing year over year, first of all, because the birth rate in Japan is very low, so the population shrinks, and also the life expectancy is very high. So when you combine both, you see a growing number of elderly population. Japan is also called the silver market, like the gray hair, and this is the way to illustrate that. Japan is also, the economy is strong, but in regards to innovation in the medical world, Japan is importing 60% of its technology. This means that whenever there is a real technology that can meet a local, and I say again, a local unmet need, this market is tremendously big. the numbers here, the import is almost $23 billion of medical equipment. So of course you understand the opportunities that are attached to that. Another very, very important thing about Japan, which makes it very unique in comparison to other markets, in Japan, the government is the sole insurer, which means that all the expenditure of the healthcare market is sitting on the government. There is a very big need to reduce these costs by any technology that can solve either pricing, better performance, cutting medical teams' time, and so forth. As for the leading cause of death in Japan, I don't want to take you too much into the history, but anything around malignants, cancers, families, etc., is really, really rising year over year due to pollution, due to a lot of different elements. But this is also something that should be considered. The second largest is, of course, the cardiovascular related and neurovascular related diseases, which are also impacted with the Alzheimer and dementia related diseases as well. So we talked about the single payer system, but it's very, very complex. So in Japan, every citizen has to be insured by the government, and the government gives 70% cashback, or actually insures 70% of the healthcare cost, and even for seniors up to 90%. This is dramatic.
I'm on a webinar.
Sorry? Okay. Anyway, knowing that also mean how you enter Japan. We'll talk about it in the next slides. So when we talk about Japan medical market, I think we should talk about few key terms. So, when I speak, maybe for me, it's very clear, but let's be on the same line. So of course, in Japan, the Ministry of Health and Labor is responsible for the policy and reimbursement rules. And this means that when you want to tackle an unmet need and you need to change reimbursement, which is not the first thing that I will recommend to startups, but in Itaman, we had a very, very good success story with that. Should have connections to the MHLW. The Japanese FDA is called PMDA, and this is actually the regulatory license to sell a device in Japan. Shonin, it's a Japanese word. That Shonin means that the company has an approval to sell locally. Then there are the MA and DMAs, which are actually the market authorization holders. They are either the importer of goods to Japan, so they register the product on themselves, or they are acting as an agent, which actually is more of a distributor, but the manufacturer holds the license. This has a lot of implications on the business side, and later on we will touch a little bit on that. There is another unique system. It's on the gray zone. It's called private import system. And for this is actually a system that supports doctors' need to check or to test new technologies or technologies that are registered elsewhere in the world. And the PMDA approval is usually long, or it's prolonged for any reason. There is a channel to import goods to Japan. This could happen tomorrow, of course, based on few preparations, but this is really an immediate market entry opportunity. And of course, there are the IRBs, the research, the POCs, which are getting Helsinki or similar approval by the researcher and the hospital. And in this way, you can import goods to Japan, which are not PMDA approved yet. As for the distributors, there are many kinds of distributors in Japan. There are the supermarkets, which that's my personal terminology, but these are huge importers like Fuda Denshi, Nihon Koden. They actually touch nationwide hospitals and clinics. On the one hand, they have very good coverage. On the other hand, they are not specialists. So it's really depends on your technology. Like, for example, specialists like Japan Lifeline or Philips Japan, they are very special in their field, and they are also a very big market share holder. Now, there is a role to a mediator in Japan or a consultant that works with you and understand the Japanese market, but also have the connections in the specific field. So if you're in aerospace or in cyber security, I guess you have your own milieu of people that you know, but you don't know people in the medical field. And this is something very important. Usually Japanese like to work with people that they can trust. Trust is built on a very long way down the road. And I think that this is something that you need to consider while you are planning your market entry. Now, selecting what kind of model you want to use or what kind of pathway you want to take is really a complex decision. And it touches, if you want to have an exclusive distributor, there are a lot of advantages like the revenue commitment, the brand awareness, the relationship with the key opinion leaders, but there are also disadvantages. It's a very slow growth usually. It's very difficult to change an exclusive distributor. There are a lot of negative impacts to changing your own initial distributor. And the shifting of the PMDA approval, the Japanese FDA, is also an element that will come back to the picture, even though you already registered. So changing a holder of the shonin is not an easy task. There are the non-exclusives. You see, there are multiple channels. They don't have any control on your PMDA approval, but they have lower commitment, and it's a little bit more difficult to manage a chain of distributors. We talked about the private import system. It's much quicker time to market. It's dedicated. You have someone that really understands this market or this niche technology, and it's much easier to manage. But the disadvantages are that it's a risky business, cannot reach high quantities, and it's not allowed to do any PR activities when you do private import system, private import channel, because actually you're not selling the device. And this is very difficult to sell or to do seminars, etc. And we talked about the IRB or the research platform. Again, it's limited, it's very quick relatively, but it's like a one-to-one sales. So in a nutshell, the Japanese distribution system or the way you want to enter Japan is very complex. Japan is really like a spider web. You need to understand what are the relationship between the different distributors, and this is a decision that should be taken earlier in the decision-making process. Now, we talked about the time to market versus higher growth, but Japan grow slowly. So you need to have a lot of patience in this journey. Well, we talked about Japan.
Can we go back to I think first slide is the most important slide for
this one?
For this audience. Yes, I want to stay on this a little bit.
Okay.
Let me ask you a few questions. So from your experience, when you say exclusive relationship with the local distributor, right? Like, for example, let's pick a supermarket like Nihon Koden or Fukuda Denshi that are very entrenched in the business.
Yeah.
When you say that you need to shift PMDA to them versus if you do non-exclusive, you stay in control. Can you spend that? I think this is not given that people understand what it means.
Okay.
Can you explain what this and what the relationship to the DIMAs and who apply for the authorization and who takes the efforts and what? Talk a little bit about that element, because I think that's the most confusing part.
Okay, sure. No worries. So the process of PMDA approval or the Japanese FDA could be obtained by either the manufacturer or the Japanese side. Now, on the Japanese side, when you have an exclusive distributor, for example, Itama Medical had Philips Japan as its exclusive distributor for its home sleep testing devices. All the process, the professional teams that are handling the registration is much more I would say, professional. The relationships between these giants and the PMDA are very good, so they know how the process. Usually, they can obtain PMDA approval faster than anyone. There is another option that your local DEMA with an H at the end, so actually not the real registered, not the real company that registered the product, is also handling your PMDA approval. So actually what is happening for the Israeli companies, the cost, which could be between $100,000, depends really on the class, but from $100,000 even up to $500,000 or more, it's not a burden, an economical burden on the company itself, but the local distributor is registered the PMDA on behalf of the company and actually is acting as a distributor, as a business partner, but doesn't hold the license itself. Now, I hope this part I try to cover, if that answered the question.
Yeah, so let me just, think, because I see the faces on the people who participate, and I know a lot of them, they are small, early stage startups. So I think we should stay here a little bit. And so I'm a startupist, and I'm thinking loud. So from everything you described, I say, okay, day one, if I want to generate some entry to the Japanese market, I don't have much resources.
Right.
I passed, I have FDA or CE mark or approval somewhere else in the world. First thing I can do tomorrow morning, I can do the private import route, connect to a KOL. This KOL will apply for this authorization, not the company, right?
No. Actually, it's much faster. So
Okay.
when you work on the private import system or you are using an IRB channel, you don't need to register at all. The only thing you need is a local agent, actually a company that has a license, a medical license. Could be a very small company like a Moms and Pops. By the way, with the Synron Dental, we sold a device which was the sales price to the doctor was $50,000. It's not something cheap. And we sold to the private sector. And actually what we had a distributor, which was our agent, and he was actually the import agent. Went to the customs, took the machine, signed all the paperwork, and when the machines were in Japan, he was doing a one-on-one sales. And in this way, just to give you an example, first year 50 units, second year 100 units, we reached up to 200 and I don't remember exactly, but more than 200 units per year to the multiplier. So for a startup, it's actually not a bad option. Remember that we need a finished good. We need a device that works.
Yes, so that will be either the study route with IRB,
Yeah,
or the private import for commercial reasons.
yeah.
But again, no promotion and delimitation, but I don't need regulatory registration in Japan.
No need.
Very good. And then if I decided to go broader, now I need the FDA or Japanese FDA, so PMDA approval. So then I can choose between allowing a local Japanese company to do the work with the agency, but then they own the shonin, the approval, when they got the approval, and I'm exclusive with them, and I have no control, but they expense and they did the relationship and it's easier. Or I'm hiring one of those DEMAs, and I do as an Israeli company, although I don't have a Japanese subsidiary, I do the application through them, and they own the shonin, so I can choose multiple distributors in Japan. Did I summarize it correctly?
Summary, very good summary. Just to that everyone with too many new words here. When we work with a non-exclusive distributor, by the way, it's not really a non-exclusive and exclusive. It's a shonin owner or not a shonin owner. For example, I can work with Neon Coden as my exclusive or non-exclusive distributor, but I can ask, or we can agree that Neon Coden is covering for me. I'm still the shonin holder, but they are paying for the PMDA approval. What does it give them? Commercially, it could give them exclusivity. If we are veterans in the market and we have a very good local team, and we understand that our exclusive distributor is not doing a good job, what we can do as a Shonin holder, we can shift the exclusive distributor into a non-exclusive and add more distributors, but then we know how to manage the market.
Yes, and if I remember from Itamar era, it's per product. It means it could be that one product you can have the distributor in Japan as a Shonin holder, and for another product you can actually be your own Shonin holder through the DIMA, and that's okay. It's per product, not per company.
Exactly.
Right?
This is very, very important. With Itama, we had Philips Japan as exclusive distributor for our home sleep testing devices, and we had Neon Koden working on the cardiology device as an exclusive distributor, but they didn't own the Shonin.
Yeah. Quick reminder, everybody, if you have questions, Eran, I see that you can ask a question in a second, but for the rest, you can use the chat to type questions you have, and Hannah will make sure we're summarizing them, and Ira will address them as we go along. Eran, you had the question.
Yeah, I had two questions. One is regarding the private import. Is it limiting you in like university hospitals? Yes or no? My experience was that they are less happy to do so with a class 3 or something which is more invasive or long term. So if you at your experience, and just if I understand you correctly, so one of the major issue in negotiations is to try to get the Shonin under your property. You would say this is something you try to get if you can afford it, or it's not necessarily right?
Okay, let's start one by one. So as for the private import system, there is a limitation. You are, in this case, you're a small company. You would like to have quick revenues, and you are activating a local agent to do the private import system for you. You're right that it's mainly for the, I would say, the clinic level, where the doctors, the private doctors have more control, but not necessarily, because actually in the middle there are all the national hospitals, but the university hospitals are very unique. They're very powerful in Japan, and they actually, one of the most common strategies, when you, not regardless of the exclusivity, private import, etc., is to work and to sell to the university hospitals. They draw the line, and other hospitals will follow. So, in a nutshell, the private import channel is a very quick channel, but it's limited. Okay. Now, what was the second question?
If you can summarize regarding the Shonin holding,
Oh.
This is the main thing that you would consider. Do you try to get the Shonin under you if you can afford it? Like this is.
Yeah, I understand the question. So first of all, it's a strategic but also financial decision, right? So if you are a class 3, etc., it's very complex. So, and you can also obtain the Shonin by using an FDA consultant or a PMDA consultant, right? So you do not have to tie the Shonin or the Shonin holding to the distribution network. That's one thing. The second thing is, when you are very unique and the technology is complex, the role of the exclusive distributor is very, very significant when it comes to market education. They are really, really powerful. Okay, so just to give you an example, it's very easy. Philips Japan controlled 50% of the CPAP market and 27% of the home sleep testing market. No one can fight with that. Okay, so when you are planning your market entry, there are few key elements that you have to consider as a map, as a whole, not one by one, because each one is pulling to another side. I will try to touch on this point, I think, in one of the last slides. Okay. All right.
How difficult it is to shift the PMDA from one distributor, exclusive to distributor, to another, when you say it's difficult?
Yeah. First of all, in some cases, you need to repeat the submission. This is really depends on the technology, but it's a long process. On the other hand, if the submission was done correctly and you already have, no adverse event happens. So everything is, a normal situation. Could be it depends on the class, but it could be between half a year to a year and a half. So it's a gap in your revenue generation pathway, right? And this should be considered, but there are many ways to handle that. So if there is an install base, and if the distributor is you didn't fight, you didn't divorce, but you disagree, then there are commercial elements that could be taken into consideration actually to keep more or less a smooth shift. So you can solve it commercially.
It's fair to say once a Japanese entity like a distributor own your shonin, your PMDA approval, it's risky and complicated to shift it. It's a big event. It's not something. It's not a paperwork. It's not a administrative in nature.
Right. It's not just a big event in regards to the re-registration, but you will see when we talk about the Japanese culture or business culture, the relationships are the key. So if you appointed an exclusive distributor, Japanese take into consideration you really did a very, very thorough work in that decision. You didn't just pick the first one that you saw in an event or some congress. So when you are identified with the local brand, okay? So when you disconnect from that local brand, Japanese translate it immediately as some kind of a problem or some kind of something bad happened, because why should you change your exclusive distributor? You did such a thorough work selecting this distributor. That distributor also wanted to work with you. What the hell happened? So this is more risky in my point of view than shifting the shonen technically.
Yeah. There is another question. It's a bit regulatory rather than commercial, but it says, can you please address the chance or possibility to get an initial marketing approvals to get PMDA in Japan if you already have C or FDA versus if you don't have? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, that's wow, Gilad, that's your philosophy. Japan first.
Yes,
but
it's a complex question.
It's a complex decision. So Japanese, by culture, take low risks. They don't like to take risks. That's why you will see the decision-making process is long, and there are a lot of considerations along the road. So if you have an FDA, it means that you have some kind of a token of excellency, or someone already checked you, right? You passed the FDA. It's easier for the governmental officers to take decisions, but and this means that it's probably going to be a little bit more smooth and maybe even shorter. However, this trend is changing, and some of the good brands in Japan will register your product even without an FDA.
Yes. Another question, Ira, because I think that's becoming an interesting topic, of course, and it was expected. So somebody asked, for complex device, let's say class 3, an implant or some interventional type ablation or something, is your recommendation is to integrate the local distributor in the company's training material and product design to fit the market? So would you engage them early on in the design phases to make sure it fits the Japanese market?
Absolutely, yes. We have a lot of cases here with the microsurgery in Israel companies, startups that we are consulting to. Just imagine a 60-year-old American male and the 60-year-old Japanese male. Even the heart size could be 1.5 times bigger. Vessels, etc. Or a very old, we had this case, by the way, with Itamar. Itamar is a very, very good case. I would call them the Japanese grandmothers. The wrist is so thin that the bracelet couldn't hold it. I mean, it was designed for a European and American market. This is really something, it's not interventional technology, but it shows you that, First of all, as for ergonomics, as for the way Japanese are doing the tests, just to give you another example from the dental world, there are at least 30% of the Japanese dentists, they treat while standing. They stand up, they don't sit on the chair. All the angles, all the lighting, everything around the dentist changes. Okay, so you really have to do a thorough work and understand what's the environment your doctors are working in, what's the care pathway, what's the reimbursement. All these things can make a very significant impact on the local design, not talking about the IT-related issues and UX-related issues and the Japanese language, which should be embedded in the devices. But we have this, Itamar is a great way of explaining a lot of things. For the cardiology device, we had a probe. It was a single-use probe, and the reimbursement was more expensive than the probe cost. Itamar challenged this crazy market barrier by turning the single-use probe into a multi-use probe, and in this way, in the same price, the doctors could do more tests. So there are so many things you need to know before you enter Japan. I think that the number one mistake is actually to copy a US or European strategy and try to find a dealer in Japan. Then the negotiations and discussions could be amazing. Sales would be a disaster.
Ira-san, next question.
Yeah.
You mentioned in your prior slide that this is a question from Gal Cohen, that exclusive distributor equals slow growth. And that's challenging because he asked, doesn't a big distribution has a high incentive and great force and a wide geographical coverage to push the product quickly in the market versus multiple distributors? Why do you make that equation?
Okay, so the access is a little bit different. So we have an exclusive and a non-exclusive, and we have a specialist, or let's call it a supermarket. Okay. The fact that you are, so when you are an exclusive distributor, you are tied to an agreement of quantities or revenues, etc. You want to keep the exclusivity, you meet the target. Usually, if nothing crazy happens, okay? This is a very, very important element for any company who wants to grow and has a very solid revenue channel. Japanese meet their promise. So you have a very stable market, slow growth, but you can build on that. And actually the first year is really a testing time for each distributor. So they just want to feel the market. Then the second and third year is more of a strategic growth because the strategy is changing, the product is changing, or the way the sales teams are selling, they build up more confidence. From year 3 on, we will see a much faster growth. So this is when it comes to an exclusive distributor. Now, a non-exclusive distributor has other targets. So you are not the only kid. And when you're not the only kid, it means that less energy is turned towards you. And this means that it could be slower. On the other hand, so I'm a little bit confusing you maybe, but Japan is not an automatic answer to every problem or every channel. A non-exclusive chain could allow you to be very powerful in specific regions that are known to be very attractive to your own technology, whether it's geographic or segmented, or as we talked about, the university hospitals, the general hospitals, and the clinics. So planning here, again, is really depends on your product and technology, and then the planning will mirror that or these opportunities.
Ira-san, practically speaking, question from Meryl Weber. Can the manufacturer appoint a non-exclusive distributor, so to keep the option, but give them de facto exclusive rights? So the agreement is non-exclusive, but you choose only one. Would the market perceive it as something negative or treat it as if it's an exclusive?
Okay, so first of all, this is a commercial question, right? So yes, you can do that. you with relationship with the distributor. By the way, you can shift a non-distributor to become an exclusive distributor, right? So technically, it's of course it's an option. I think that you need to look at exclusivity from a different angle. It's not really about control. It's really about who takes care of the market education of your product. Who is committed to you for the long run? Now, when a Japanese company decides it wants to be exclusive, for us, it's a weekly event. It happened this week. Wow, we have an exclusive distributor. Everyone is happy. Japanese see, when they are exclusive, they see 5, 10, 20 years forward. They understand how to take your technology to grow this business. So they don't see it as just a commercial decision. They really see it as a strategic decision to fit their own unmet need, and that's why the tie with an exclusive distributor is very important in Japan.
Last question for this slide, and then we have to let you continue.
Okay.
From Galit Zuckerman, can you give some example of exclusive distribution terms? For example, paying for shoning without asking for holding the shoning, or paying licensing fee for the exclusive rights, exclusive periods. What's your experience? What is accepted by the Japanese companies?
Very good question. So I would divide it into two. So commercially speaking, of course, you would like to set revenue targets and a growth year over year. Now in the United States, maybe not in the United States, in Gilad world, you are growing 30% year over year. Please do not accept that in Japan. But yes, you can expect the growth. And actually, this is a very good discussion. Remember, the Japanese see you as a partner. Maybe we see our distributors worldwide as some partners or some, commercial agents. Japanese see you as partners. You will see it. You become a family. So actually, you can demand revenues. You can demand growth. You can demand specific targets. You know that in specific hospitals, there are key opinion leaders you want to have as your, as part of the company's consultants, etc., or they are advocating some treatment in your own area, or they are planning a reimbursement change. You can ask the exclusive distributor to target these hospitals. And sometimes it's very difficult, costs a lot of money. They don't have relationships, you can do that. And this is a very strategic move. Versus, I would say that the PMDA issue is shift. Please do not remember that shifting the PMDA is such a hassle. It takes a long time. It also has a very good or very negative impact on your revenue. But remember that you are not changing overnight. So maybe you already chose the next exclusive distributor. And in this way, you didn't lose any time to market. So there are so many things you need to consider. But I think that generally speaking, having an exclusive distributor in Japan is very powerful.
I would just make two other quick comments. First, that if you give Japanese company, from our experience, a minimum targets in your contract, they will meet it. Even if they don't sell, they will take inventory because they're honored. They respect their commitment in a very strong way. To an extent, of course, but in general, definitely if it's a quarterly issue. And their payment capabilities are great. They will always pay on time, on target, which is not always the case with other type of geographies. Ira-san, you have 5 more minutes, so I'd like you to continue.
Let's move.
Go ahead.
So I want you to, we talked about Japan, modern country, so powerful, but it all sits on culture. And I want to share with you this slide. This is the structure of the society in the period that is called Edo. Actually, this is the year 1686, where Japan actually was consolidated under the shogun. Maybe you saw the movie. and the structure was very hierarchy in the warriors, the farmers, etc. All these codes, in a sense, of course, Japan is very modern. Some Japanese will even say that this is not the right picture anymore. But from a foreigner point of view, you need to understand that Japan is probably the only different planet that is in this world. The culture is totally different from anything you know. So hierarchy, loyalty, trust, the commitment, and the discipline, all these elements are part of the daily work in Japan. And it's also, one of the key questions that we are always asked is why Japanese are so slow? Why it's taking so much time to make Japanese get into some decision? So Japanese are very low risk takers. They plan ahead and ahead and ahead, and they try to see all the angles. Okay, that's why R&D is also very important as part of the negotiations or part of the business relationships, and they take group decisions. No CEO will tell you left or right and change his mind after 1 week. They all have to agree, and that's why it's so difficult. Now they work in what we call nemawashi. Nemawashi in Japanese is like how the tree is advancing his roots in the organization. It's all about mini groups and reporting up and down and asking a lot of questions. It's coming again and again. It's very, very tedious. So you need someone to take you with the hand to see that this works well. Japanese and Israelis, this is a Harvard Business Review picture. Culturally speaking, Israelis and Japanese are just the opposite of each other. Culturally speaking, I can talk about it for 5 hours, so I just move forward. But you understand the culture here is a key issue. So how do you start, or what do you do tomorrow? So actually, I'm a little bit pitching for myself, but not only for me. I think you should, any company, mature, startup, should work with a consultant and understand both Japan and the medical market. Our job at Network in Motion is only medical. That's what we try to specialize in, but there are other companies that are doing similar job. I think you should select one consultant to work with you. The second thing is that you will work very closely with this consultant. I think that the NCI model is very, very relevant to this process, and actually build up the go-to-market strategy according to the market needs and based on your technology and innovative elements. Then you will agree on the go-to-market strategy. It's not just a word. This summarizes everything we talked about today. How to build your strategy is one of the best or most important key success factors. And the consultant work is not just to work with you and on the planning, it's also to introduce you to potential business partners. Now, finalizing my presentation, there is a proverb in Japan that is, the translation is in the white, but it says, Sonae areba orei nashi. If you plan ahead, there are no regrets. So planning is important. Long decision making is very vital here. Who are your partners is also how to choose your partner. And please don't say yes to the first company you see on some event, because we also have a very strong impact on choosing the wrong distributor in Japan, and all the implications of that cost us a lot of money. And last thing, some of your Japanese distributors are global players. For example, Gilad knows IceCure. IceCure is working with Terumo in Japan, but also in other Southeast Asia market. But Terumo is a competitor of Medtronic, J&J, and Boston Scientific. And they generate more than 50% of their revenues in the United States. So tying up with a Japanese global company is also a very good door opener to the global world.
Ira-san, thank you very much. Arigato gozaimasu for joining us this morning. This was a truly amazing insight, and thank you. We appreciate it. Everybody have a good day and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
very
you.
much.
Thank you, Ira.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.